everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Olivia, and this is a channel where I talk about the presidents and make their favorite desserts. Alright, I am shooting this on Monday, so on Thursday when this goes up, a new day will have been dawned, a new president will have been inaugurated. If all goes well, hi Joe, welcome to the family. I'll see you in 40 videos. And with all that said, let's kick it off with Daddy's favorite, John Quincy Adams. Now, for John Quincy, all of the places I looked said that he didn't really like dessert, but he liked fresh fruit, and I could sit here and cut up a lot of fruit for you guys, but that's not really the half-assed kind of content that I want on my channel. So I'm taking some creative liberty on this one, and I am making a fruit tart. I think John Quincy would have liked it. Alright, so I'm gonna get started making the crust. If you're wondering, I am using gluten-free flour just because right now I am suspicious of a gluten allergy. So I'm trying it out. John Quincy Adams was born in 1767 in Massachusetts, and he was the oldest son of the second president, John Adams. Stupid gluten-free flour. Alright, stop. I think that's enough. I think you'll see that throughout their lives like really paralleled a lot. But growing up, John Adams was an extremely tough father. He was obsessed with making his kids great. He wanted them to really live up to everything that they had to offer. And this really took a toll on all of his kids, but specifically John Adams said to John Quincy Adams, "Unless you're president, you're a failure." Setting the bar really high. I'm glad I didn't have John Adams as my dad. "You come into life with advantages which will disgrace you if your success is mediocre, and if you do not rise to the head of not only your own profession, but of your country. It will be owing to your own laziness and obstinacy." Those are some really harsh words. Luckily, John Adams was able to graduate from Harvard and become a lawyer and then eventually become the president. He really wanted to make his parents proud, but it was very different for his two brothers. They were heavy drinkers, they were two drunks, and Thomas lived with his parents and eventually died in a carriage accident. And a lot of people think that his other brother Charles might have been gay, and John Adams basically disowned him, which obviously kind of broke Abigail Adams's heart. I'm sorry, my camera just shut down for some reason. What was I talking about? So you'll see throughout their lives they were very similar in a lot of different ways. They both had the same parenting styles. We'll talk about this later, but let's just say the apple didn't fall very far from the tree. So when John Quincy Adams was a teenager, probably about 14, he was sent abroad to study under other diplomats. So at a very young age, he was exposed to so many different parts of the world. So he kind of had like a great diplomatic education when he was very young. And one of the places that he ended up going to was Russia, which will come into play a little bit later. In 1797, John married Louisa Catherine Johnson, and she was the first lady to not be born in America. She was actually born in England, and from what I hear, she was quite charming. Just being one of those days, huh? This will not open. Oh wait, I got it. Never give up. Never surrender. This is probably 100 years old. So John and Louisa would have 4 children together. However, 3 of them would die at a young age. Their only daughter died in infancy. I think she was around 1. John Quincy Adams, like I said, was also a very tough father. He wouldn't let his kids come home during Christmas break so that they could stay and study, and just a lot of things like that. John Adams II basically drank himself to death by the time he was 31, and their other son, George Washington Adams, fell or he jumped off of a steamboat. A lot of people think that it was actually suicide. It coincided with the same time that John Adams was leaving office after he lost the election to Thomas Jefferson. And he called George to Washington to come and help them move to Boston. And it's rumored that he was just so intimidated by his father because he wasn't as successful as his dad wanted him to be. So instead of going to see him and helping him move, they think that he jumped off the steamboat. This is obviously really sad, but it just goes to show that tough love just isn't always the answer. And like I said, their only daughter died in infancy. So after a while, they only had one surviving child. I have to melt some butter now. You never have any good spoons! So John Quincy Adams would eventually serve as the minister to many different countries, including the Netherlands, and even taking his father's old post in England. And James Madison chose him to be the minister of Russia, America's first minister to Russia. And it's a place that a lot of Americans haven't been, but since John Quincy Adams was sent there as kind of like a teenager, he was able to feel more comfortable there. When he was in Russia, he was able to negotiate so that Russia would finally release the ships that were once captured by Denmark. And when he was minister to England, he helped negotiate the treaty that ended the War of 1812. Forgot the salt. When John Quincy returned to the States, he was chosen by James Madison to be his Secretary of State, and he was also chosen to be James Monroe's Secretary of State as well. And he was regarded as the most qualified person to ever hold this position so far, and he would be for like many years later. It doesn't really say to grease this thing, but I'm gonna do it anyway, just in case. When he was the Secretary of State for James Monroe, he actually basically outlined the Monroe Doctrine. This is that thing that stated that Western countries didn't want any part of Europe and helped the Spanish countries gain their independence. It's called the Monroe Doctrine, but it was basically written by John Quincy Adams. He also helped to acquire Florida from Spain. Another thing about John Quincy Adams is that he was part of like 5 different political parties throughout his life. He was elected onto the Senate as a Federalist. However, he agreed so much with Thomas Jefferson that he was pretty much kicked out of the Federalist Party, and he had to switch to being a Democratic Republican. I don't think the dish I have is like right, so I'm really trying here, people. So in 1824, he ran against Andrew Jackson for president, and technically Andrew Jackson got 99% of the electoral vote, but he only got 41% of the popular vote. Since they were both running from the same party, they kind of split the vote. And nobody got majority vote in this election, so it went to the House of Representatives, and the Speaker of the House, named Henry Clay, he voted for John Quincy Adams to be president. And when John Quincy became president, he named Henry Clay as his Secretary of State. And this kind of tarnished his presidency because a lot of people think that this wasn't right. They think that they traded. So the Jacksonians, or the people that liked Andrew Jackson, basically ran John Quincy Adams' name through the mud. They call this the Adams-Clay Alliance, and they called it the corrupt bargain. They thought that they kind of made a deal beforehand, and they basically thought that John Quincy told Henry Clay that if you vote for me to become president, you could be my Secretary of State. And I don't really know if this is true, but it does seem extremely suspicious. All right, so my crust has to go in the oven for about 25 minutes. So I'm gonna let it bake and then check back with you when I start making the filling. All right, so my crust is in my oven. I am going to start on the filling now. What I need to do is I need to make this into whipped cream. I definitely put too much heavy cream in here, but I'm going with it. All right. To be honest with you guys, in my research, I didn't see a ton about John Quincy Adams' actual presidency. I think he really came through before and after his presidency, not so much during. His presidency really focused on the infrastructure of America, building canals and highways and stuff like that. And he also tried to expand America's scientific research. Those were the 2 main things in his presidency that I could really find. Maybe I just didn't do my research very well. Most of his foreign affairs were done before he was the president, so most of his presidency was just trying to build the infrastructure of America and focusing on science and exploration. And I'm not saying these things aren't important. Obviously, they are super important, but it's not as like exciting as some of the other presidencies that we've seen. And John Quincy Adams prided himself on being like a man of morals. He did things that he thought was right, even if it made him unpopular. So in one case, he overturned a treaty signed by the Creek Nation, which is a Native American tribe. And the treaty basically said that Georgia got all of the Creek Nation's land. And he overturned this treaty basically because he thought that Georgia obtained the land in fraudulent ways. And obviously, Georgia was pretty pissed because these white people thought that they kind of deserved all of the Native Americans' land. But John Adams didn't think so, and he wouldn't let that shit fly. This is the tart crust. Pretty boring to show you, but I just wanted to show you anyway. Shiloh, off the table. Shiloh, are you a bad kitty? Go on the kitchen table, you bad kitty. Another thing that made John Quincy Adams a little bit unpopular is that he refused to basically campaign. He thought that being the president should have been like a moral thing based on merit and the work that's being done instead of just a popularity contest. And I think that this is admirable, but obviously you have to campaign. You're not going to get elected that way. And he even said, if the country wants my services, she must ask for them. So obviously in the election of 1828, John Quincy Adams lost to Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson was probably like, yeah, finally. Now, normally, after a president loses the election and moves out of the White House, I usually say, this is what happened. They moved back home, they moved blah, blah, and then they died, end of story. John Adams is very different. So John Quincy Adams was our second one-term president. And the first was his dad, John Adams, which is just one of the many similarities that they had. And after he lost the election, he did go back to his home in Massachusetts. And I think he intended to basically stay out of public life, but he was bored. He was straight up bored in retirement. So he ran and got elected to the House of Representatives. He's the first president to actually go into Congress after serving as president, and I don't think that there's many more, to be honest. I know there's probably a few, but I think he's one of the only presidents to serve in public life after his presidency is over. It's kind of like winning the game and then going back and doing like the fourth level again. You know, I think a lot of the other presidents were like, guys, I won. Like, I'm not, I don't really care. So John Quincy Adams really did a lot when he was in the House of Representatives. First of all, he was always kind of like in the minority of public opinions, but he really fought for those opinions. He was the only president who didn't own any slaves aside from his dad, John Adams, and he really stood up for anti-slavery measures. So I guess in the Congress during this time, they had this gag order, which basically stated that no debating about slavery or criticism of slavery could be talked about on the Congress floor. He worked really hard to overturn this, and eventually in 1848 they did overturn this. He was also against the annexation of Texas, and he was also against the war against Mexico, and he always gave such passionate speeches about the things that he was for or against, and he actually earns the name of Old Man Eloquent, you know, because he was pretty old at this time. He was already the president, and he was just like the old guy who was back in Congress. It's kind of like in The Office when Michael went back to being in sales for like 2 seconds, and it was like, oh, you're here now. I definitely put too much cream cheese in here and heavy cream, and I can't take it out now, so that's just how that's gonna be. Another very important thing that he did after he was the president is that he defended the Africans in the Amistad case. I hope I'm saying that right. So this case started when 2 Portuguese slave hunters basically kidnapped 53 Africans and sold them illegally into slavery. And then they put them on a ship to set sail to Cuba, and this ship was called the Amistad. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. So while they were aboard this ship, one of the Africans was able to unchain himself and all of the other Africans on board, and they basically fought against their captors. They killed the ship's captain and the cook, and these people were really horrible to these Africans. They told them that they would be killed and eaten once they got to the plantation. Just horrible. So they killed these people, but they kept some alive in order to navigate the ship because they didn't really know how to do it. And they wanted to go back to Africa, but the Spaniards that they kept alive to navigate secretly changed their course to America. American ships captured the Amistad somewhere off the coast of Long Island, New York. When Americans found the Amistad in the state that it was and saw that these Africans killed all the other people, they put the Africans back in chains and they imprisoned them while the trial was going on. So during the first trial, they ruled that these slaves weren't actually slaves and that they were sold illegally into slavery. But of course, not everyone was happy with this, so they appealed the court case and it was brought to the Supreme Court. Now this is where John Quincy Adams comes in. Keep in mind, John Quincy Adams was 73 when this court case happened, and he had already been the president. At the time, Martin Van Buren was the president, and during this court case, John Quincy Adams said that Martin Van Buren was abusing his powers and that these Africans had the right to defend their freedoms on this ship. And he said in front of this courtroom, he said, "The moment you come to the Declaration of Independence that every man has a right to life and liberty and an inalienable right, this case is decided." And he also said, "I ask nothing more on behalf of these unfortunate men than this declaration." So basically he was saying, in our declaration, we say that every man is equal, yet we hold these people in slavery. And this is kind of similar to his dad defending the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre. The Addams family was basically just trying to hold America accountable and have America put their money where their mouth is. They recognized that America couldn't be this hypocritical country and that these were the foundation years that these things really mattered. They just wanted America to be held to the standard that America held themselves to. And I honestly think that that's something that we're still trying to do today, and that men like John Adams and John Quincy Adams would be kind of pretty helpful right now. All right, I'm just putting the cream and stuff into the stuff. You know what I mean. So after John Quincy Adams defended these Africans, they won the case. The Supreme Court chose to uphold what the other court had said and say that they weren't slaves and that they were sold into slavery illegally. And after all of this was done, abolitionists raised enough money for the surviving Africans to return back home. Some of these people died in prison, and some of them died on the way to America the first time. So the surviving people at the end of the day got to go home. And I don't think that this would have happened if John Quincy Adams didn't step in and defend them. And I just think that it's amazing. I can't think of another time that an ex-president basically became a lawyer again. And I think that that's super astonishing. He also kind of helped to establish the Smithsonian. He was obviously pretty passionate about science and stuff. And yeah, he helped establish the Smithsonian. All right, guys, so this is what it's looking like now. It looks delicious. I ate a lot of it, obviously. And it just has to cool for a little bit, so I might just pop it in the freezer to help it harden up a little bit. just wish you could buy the amount of things that you needed. Like, I don't know when I'm gonna use this heavy cream. I don't know. I will remember you. Will you remember me? All right, so I took it out of the freezer, and honestly, it looks really delicious. Yeah. All right, I get to decorate it with fruit now. I have all my fruits here. I brought these preserves for this. Comment below, how do you open freaking jars? I know it won't help me now, but maybe in the future. Remember the almond stuff.
Never give up.
I'm not doing this. John Quincy Adams was in the House of Representatives. One day, he was hit by a stroke when he was on the Congress floor, and he died 2 days later. And his last words were, "This is the end of earth, but I am content." And he was 80 years old. Now, there was a young man who served in Congress with John Quincy Adams, and he was actually put on the committee to plan John Quincy Adams' funeral. And he probably listened to a lot of the speeches that John Quincy Adams gave, and they had some pretty similar political views. Take a wild guess. Comment below. Stop the video. Comment below. In your head, say it amongst yourselves. Who is this? That man's name was Abraham freaking Lincoln. So yeah, Abraham Lincoln and John Quincy Adams both worked in the House of Representatives together. And I'm sure, in a way, John Quincy Adams probably influenced Abraham Lincoln. And obviously John Adams influenced John Quincy Adams. So in a way, I think that John Adams had maybe like a finger in the process of abolishing slavery. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln deserves all of the credit that he gets, but I also think that John Adams and John Quincy Adams should get a little bit more credit, just a little more credit. Oh my God, guys. It's so pretty. Can you guys see this? It's like so pretty. This is definitely the prettiest dessert I've made so far on this channel. And if you don't give it the freaking compliments it deserves, I don't know, guys. Let's try this. I'm supposed to use a pan that had a removable bottom, but I don't own that. I don't know who does own that. Let's go ahead and try the beautiful fruit tart. This is getting ranked for prettiest for sure. It's really good. The crust is a bit crumbly, and I think it might have been the gluten-free flour. It's something I've never worked with before, but other than that, the actual thing itself isn't so sweet. There's not very much sugar in the recipe, and I think that really highlights the fruit in it. So I can't speak for him, but I think John Quincy Adams would have eaten the shit out of this. Oh yeah, I forgot to say that John Quincy Adams was also the first president to get his picture taken, which is why that is a photograph instead of a painting. So do I think that John Quincy Adams was a good president? Yes and no. From what I could tell, his presidency really was just about the infrastructure. He only had 4 years as opposed to 8. And he didn't really make any waves. Like, there's nothing really that substantial about his presidency. But with that said, I do definitely think that everything he did was super important before and after he was president. It's just basically during his presidency that wasn't that grand, at least in my own research that I did. John Quincy Adams, is he as hot as Eben Moss Brancark? No. I'm gonna be polite and just say no. He definitely is not as hot as his dad. and definitely not as hot as anybody else. He's probably as hot as his vice president, John C. Calhoun, who honestly is kind of scary to me. Alright guys, so that is it for this video on John Quincy Adams. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Make sure if you haven't yet to subscribe and to hit that ring bell so that you don't ever miss a video, or you know, whatever I'm supposed to say. Also, like, comment, share. Like, comment, share. Please. Please. Just be nice in the comments, and as always, all of my research will be in the description box below, as long as a podcast that I listen to called Presidential. As you guys know, I strive for historical accuracy, but there's a lot of information out there, and I am just one person, so if I get something wrong, make sure to comment below. Make sure if you're interested to do your own research as well. And I'll see you all next time for the 7th president, Andrew Jackson.